Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude at Beyond-Mystic, and welcome to today's movie Decode. With me, of course, is Mr. Jay Weidner. He's the producer of JFKX, the documentary Solving the Crime of the Century, and you can find his work at jweidner.com. Jay, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Excited to have you on. And of course, please join me also, folks, in welcoming the lovely Meg Moonbeam. You can find her on Beyond Mystic Academy, where she's teaching right now, Astrology Level 2, if you guys are interested in that. And of course, if you're looking at getting a personal birth chart reading, you can do so at consultations.beyondmystic.net. Meg, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Very excited to be here with you guys today and meet Jay for the first time.
Well, thank you, Meg, for that. I appreciate you being on. Guys, I'm really excited today. We're rebooting this movie Decode franchise here on Beyond Mystic. And Jay, Meg, and I, for the last couple of months, we're thinking about what movie do we start with to relook at the situation we're at today, how that ties in to perhaps the revelations, the big awakening, the big leaving that's coming up. And we chose The Truman Show, as you guys can see on the board now. So, folks, thank you for joining us. We're triple casting today on YouTube, Twitter, and also on Rumble. I'll try to bring up your comments as we go during the show, and perhaps some questions also if we have time. But first, let me ask you, Jay, why is The Truman Show, in your view, having rewatched this here to prepare for the show here today in this decode, why do you think it's important to take a look at this? And why do you think it's important now, here sitting where we're at the precipice of these big changes here in 2024, Jay?
Yeah, well, I think that the movie, of course, what people think that the movie is about is that it's a kind of a satire of our media, and it is a satire of the media. But for those of us who studied ancient religions and things, it's really also the great story of the Gnostic awakening, and with Ed Harris as the demiurge, and Carrey as the every true man, the regular person, and of course the I forget her name now, the woman with the beautiful eyes. The British woman, she's Sophia. She's coming and assisting the everyman with his awakening. And I don't want to downplay the fact that it's also a satire on media and how media creates a reality for us, because that is actually true. And there's no doubt about it, but it just has a deeper underlying story also that a lot of people miss, which is unfortunate. And maybe we can rebirth that today. So, the reason that the movie was made by Peter Weir, and he is one of my favorite filmmakers. He's Australian. He did Picnic at Hanging Rock and a bunch of really good films out of Australia. And I was, when I first heard that he was directing a movie with Jim Carrey, I was not kind of like, I didn't want to see it because I really didn't like Jim Carrey. I don't really like that kind of comedy that is comedy.
Right.
But Peter Weir really tamed him down, and he really got a great performance out of him, and turned it into his masterpiece, really. So that's what I got to say.
Okay. Interesting tidbit there. Meg, how about you? I'll go last here. What did you make of it rewatching? You had probably watched this earlier in your lifetime, rewatching it now to prepare, and also looking at the astrology of this year. Why do you think Truman Show is important right now for people to refocus on? What was your first impression rewatching this?
Yeah, well, it was so cool. I don't know why I haven't rewatched this in such a long time. And it's kind of weird because I'm on the road right now. I just told JC before we went live. And I watched the movie yesterday. And then when I was falling asleep last night, I was flipping through the channels in my hotel room and The Truman Show came on. So it was like a moment of, am I also in a movie? Am I being filmed right now? This is kind of a weird coincidence. Yeah, super trippy film that I really love. And I feel like there's a lot of different layers to it. And I feel like it kind of relates to what we're going through as a collective right now. Are we in a simulation? Are we being watched? That level to it, but also the level of a total invasion of privacy. I think we can all relate to Truman in a way that we are going through a total invasion of our privacy and our boundaries not being respected. You know, for Truman, that's with the director and the whole media. With us, it's more with the government and different shadow institutions. But yeah, I'm excited to get into it because I feel like there's a whole bunch of layers. And as always with the astrology, there are some big connections. And I think the biggest one is that we're about to enter in the autumn of this year the same eclipse cycle that we were in when the movie The Truman Show came out. And the eclipses in astrology are all about fate, destiny, our higher meaning and purpose. In the North Node position and the South Node position is what we're letting go of. So, you know, the eclipses were in Virgo Pisces, and we're about to enter that axis this year, sorry. And it's funny because Pisces rules movies, illusions, lies, brainwashing. So the theme we're going through right now.
Wow, fascinating. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that, Meg. For me, rewatching the show, I looked at it from a very different perspective as I did the first time. I think I had originally watched it when it came out, and I never rewatched it again. And I watched it again twice here in the last week preparing for the show. And it hit me, like Jay was saying, oh, okay, this is a whole other level when you understand the awakening process of humanity, when you understand the fear being used as a control mechanism. We see, of course, the main character, Truman, there having the fear of water. We're going to get into the water aspects here also in the astrology. I thought that was interesting. And to me, I thought this was important, not just as the demiurge, as Jay was saying, but here his name is Kristoff. So you get the connotation here, but also the control room is on the moon. So it's on the moon from Truman's perspective. And that brings us back to the whole story of the Elohim. Now, Jay and I did the Angels and the Great Deception Exposed. I believe it was in December, this episode here, December 21st, where we started diving into the subject matter here of who are the Elohim and perhaps where they are today, whether they're still on the planet with us or not, and how they are still watching and controlling this particular environment. So if you haven't seen this series, I recommend you do go check it out. This is going to tie in also perhaps to some of the WebBot data coming out recently. If you want to watch Cliff High's Substack, you might find a couple of good articles there about the revelations that are coming forward and what appears to be coming forward in a big way also in July and August of this year. Again, with respect to the watchers, the controllers, and where they are and our relationship to those Elohim. So again, we're going to try to tie all of this in for you guys here today. So I think we could start, Meg, with the astrology of the launch date of the Truman Show. So let me bring up that slide so you can share that with the audience members, and we'll use that as a stepping stone here for the rest of the conversation. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, really interesting. First of all, as I already said, we're in the same eclipse cycle, the same South Node, North Node axis. Well, we're about to be in the fall of this year. So when this movie was released, the South Node was in Pisces and the North Node was in Virgo. And Pisces is the sign that rules movies, fantasy, illusion, lies, deception, and brainwashing. And in Western astrology, the South Node is what we're currently going through a release process through, what we're releasing karma, that we're attached to. It's a major release, what we should not be focusing on. And when I was preparing the astrology, I was also feeling intuitively, and let me know, you guys, because I was a little bit young at the time when the Truman Show came out, but I felt like around that time, a lot of people would have been waking up, like having, red pill experiences, waking up to truths going on in the world en masse, with the South Node being in Pisces. And Jay, you're the expert on filmmaking, but I was also feeling that whoever the writer was or someone involved in this movie was quite an awake person, and that this movie has a lot of deeper meanings than just, oh, this is funny, haha, we're watching this guy, his life's a movie, right? So it's trying to give us a deeper meaning to wake people up to the fact that, yeah, we have been under a huge deception, lie, brainwashing program. And from what, I think we're going to get into that. I think it's really interesting that at the time this movie was released, Uranus and Neptune were both in the sign of Aquarius. And Uranus is the planet that rules Aquarius. So Uranus was actually the strongest outer planet at that time in his home sign. Uranus deals with ETs, outer space, star people, the future, off-world technology. And Neptune, being in Aquarius, Neptune reveals secrets to us about things when he's in a certain sign. And in terms of our spiritual connection to the other side, whatever sign Neptune is in, we can have a closer relationship, communication with whatever that sign is. And Aquarius is star people, off-worlders. So I feel like this movie might be showing us that we're being watched kind of like a movie or a TV show by some off-worlders, some ETs. JC and I were talking just before we went live that it was really interesting at the beginning of the movie. Is it a light bulb that falls down?
Yeah.
Light bulb falls down that says Sirius. What was it? Sirius 9 major?
Sirius 9 Canis major. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that where there's people that have a connection to us or maybe watching us? And this movie has been downloaded to someone as kind of like an in plain sight so that they have permission to do that to us. I don't know, but I was kind of picking that up. So it's interesting how there's a lot of off-world influence that was going on at the time when this movie was released, and we're in the same eclipse cycle. So as an astrologer, I know everything kind of repeats itself. History repeats itself. And I think there's no coincidence that we're maybe looking at this movie right now. There could be something around this movie or the actors that comes out gets highlighted this year in the collective. So I'm interested to see what comes up.
Okay, fascinating. Jay, anything to add on that before we move to the next deck?
Well, it's interesting that you were talking about that time period, because if you think about it, Dark City came out that same year. The next year was The Matrix and Eyes Wide Shut. So we're really talking about 4 movies that kind of all talk about the Matrix and the revealing of it and the seeking out of it. And Eyes Wide Shut even kind of shares something with Truman Show. I don't think anybody's ever pointed it out before, but if you think about it, in the movie Eyes Wide Shut, the Tom Cruise character, Harford, he's surrounded by everybody around him is involved in some kind of satanic cult, including his wife. He's the only one that doesn't know.
He doesn't know.
Around the whole movie, completely oblivious to the fact that every single person that he meets is involved in a satanic cult that all seem that they're all together, working together.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Truman. He doesn't understand that he's being, observed and watched and changed and by people who don't have his best interests at heart. And anyway, it's just really interesting that those are 4 of the most revealing movies. I believe there was another one that came out around that same time, the one with Tom Cruise. There's another movie around that same time. But anyway, there were 4 really interesting movies, all done all around the same time. And as a movie fan at the time, I thought, wow, what's going on here? Are we suddenly starting to talk about the truth for a change in movies? Right. And it kind of ebbed away at that point. So it was almost like the heyday of it.
Yeah, fascinating. Let me ask you, Jay, when I watched the movie too, I was thinking about the different characters. So we have the people on the moon. They're the watchers, the controllers, and they're taking orders from the architect, Kristoff, right? He says he's the creator. He's the architect of the world within a world. So I thought that's interesting. And then we have, I guess, the servants of the watchers who are on set with the true man or with humanity. So if you want to expand Truman as a one person, expand that to the collective of humans. Right. That would suggest that here on Earth, in our little world within a world, we also have servants of the Elohim or the watchers on the moon here with us as well, controlling, similar to what you were saying in Eyes Wide Shut, where Tom Cruise realizes, holy fuck, everybody around him is in the club, but he's not in it. He doesn't know yet, right?
That's right.
So I thought that was interesting. And then there's another set of characters, the people who are watching the show. So that was like, oh, well, who are those guys? Are they from a different planet also? So Meg brought up maybe they're from Sirius 9 Major, or are they from someplace else? What is your thought of the people watching the show? Is that a fractal of our consciousness of humanity watching ourselves being manipulated through that awakening process? Or is that perhaps this other entity that's kind of like sitting there rooting for humanity or rooting for Truman to wake up and eventually exit that matrix there on that stairway to heaven? What's your thoughts on that, Jay?
I think they represent the people watching our consciousness. They represent consciousness, and they when you wake up, then you want Truman to wake up, and so it's like consciousness is like a mirror, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reality is like a mirror to us, and that's why we can create our own reality. And I think that's what's really going on there. It's an interesting. Ed Davis, that's his name, right?
Ed Harris.
Ed Harris. He was also in another movie that's somewhat similar. Forget the name of it, where these people are in a train that's never stops, and they're working their way up the train till they get to the top car of the train, and there's Ed Harris, and he's running the whole show. That's another Gnostic myth, and I forget the name of it now. I'll come up with it. And
Snowpiercer, you mean?
Huh?
Snowpiercer?
Yeah, Snowpiercer. Yeah.
Okay.
You think about that's going up the Kundalini through all the obstacles as they're going up the train until they get to the top, and they stuck Ed Harris as the conductor of the train, which was very Truman Show like. And so there's a bunch of these Gnostic movies that are running around. They're very interesting.
Fascinating. Okay. Meg, do you want to do a redirect on that before we go and look at the astrology of Jim Carrey here? Where do you want to go next?
Sure. Well, I'm so happy that you just brought that point up, Jay, because I didn't realize that The Matrix and Eyes Wide Shut and some of those other movies came out around that time. And it's interesting because if I can just share something on the screen, my husband, Jens, he's from Belgium, and he follows closely a survivor of these elite families, if you guys catch my drift here, who just came out recently and said the castle that they filmed Eyes Wide Shut, which was built by the Rothschilds, was actually a place where she experienced some of her abuse.
Wow.
So that's just come out recently that, okay, maybe around the Truman Show or some of these other movies, we are in that same eclipse cycle. There will be even deeper revealings around, maybe where they were filmed or certain actors that was in it, the deeper meanings of what went on. That gives it a whole different, more intense vibe when you realize that's a place where that stuff actually took place.
Well, it also adds credence to the art imitating life, life imitating art thing. So we're really watching, when we say we're watching these films, a documentary of what's being happening to us, right? To some extent. Mm-hmm. So The Matrix is another example of that. Okay, fascinating. Now, okay, let's get to the astrology of Jim Carrey here, because I think that's very fascinating in the context also. So go ahead and let me bring that one up for you here, Meg. There you go.
Yep. Okay, awesome. So yeah, it's interesting. He's a Capricorn sun with a Capricorn stellium in Western astrology. So a stellium is when we have 3 or more planets in the same sign or house. So he's got a whole bunch of Capricorn, and Capricorn rules, being the best at something, success in your work and career. And he's one of the biggest actors of our time. It kind of goes without saying, very public figure. So that shows up in his chart. Also, I never looked at his chart before. It's really interesting. He's a Scorpio 15 degrees ascendant. So is Ed Harris. They both have the same ascendant. And Scorpio is the sign in astrology that rules deep truths, secrets, revealing, and also the dark side of life. So our ascendant is how we are seen by others, also parts of our personality and gifts and talents that we have to share with the world. So how he is seen by others is someone who likes to get to the bottom of things, go past the matrix. He himself wants to live an authentic life. At least that's what he's showing to us by, in recent years, he started talking about spirituality and consciousness, right? And wanting to get
Kundalini awakening and all that stuff. Yeah.
And exposing illusions. Also interesting that he's got Neptune, the planet that rules films, movie making, creativity, conjunct his ascendant in Scorpio. So being a professional actor, being in very notable films, working in that industry. And also what's really interesting is he's got the planet Uranus at 29 degrees of Leo right on his midheaven. And the midheaven in our charts is the top middle part of the sky at the moment we were born, where the sun is at noon, its height of power. Uranus is the planet of the age of Aquarius, unconventionality, and rebelliousness. And the midheaven is Jim Carrey tends to pick these roles that are kind of offbeat. Yes, he's a comedian, but also the more dramatic, weirder roles have a deeper meaning, Uranus and Aquarius, that helps to deconstruct the matrix and to wake people up. So I guess, seeing Jim Carrey, I don't know him personally, but I'm sure he's maybe aware that this movie has much deeper meaning and that it is helping to wake people up.
Okay. Jay, your thoughts on that?
Well, it's kind of interesting because he's been caught several times in the last 5 or 6 years revealing a whole bunch of stuff about the Illuminati while kind of making fun of it, like he's being satirical, but he's letting out all this like amazing information that he's clearly researched and understands. And oh yeah, right. The Rothschilds run all the banking. Yeah.
The mocking symbols and the Kundalini awakening stuff. I know.
You just know that it's not that he did. That's not off the cuff. You actually thought about how to say it. And
he's mastered the information. Also, he's not just acting that out. Yeah.
And his art is actually kind of interesting. He's a painter, and it's actually pretty interesting.
Right.
But I was thinking of something else while Meg was talking about the astrology, and that was the 2 films that came out that year in '98 were Dark City, which we did Decode for, and the Truman Show. And both those movies, one of the things that happens in the same thing in both those movies, they're both trying to get out and they can't. Remember, they're trying to get to Shell Beach in Dark City, and they can't get to Shell Beach ever because it really doesn't exist. And then he's trying to leave, and he can't ever leave because they keep stopping him. Yeah. And so it's interesting. The 2 films came out at the same time, both kind of revealing the Gnostic ethos, and the protagonists are trapped, and they can't get out no matter what they do.
Right.
And so it's very interesting. There is something about that time period, it must be, that caused suddenly artists to start talking about the same things at the same time. Right. And don't forget, both Dark City and The Truman Show are original screenplays. They're not based on books or graphic novels. They actually were written for movies and came out that year for the first time. Those ideas were the first time elicited, those kinds of ideas. And I hope that we can have a rebirth of that kind of movie coming out. That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, going back to Jim Carrey himself, he's gone through, I guess we could call it a come to Jesus moment at some point in his career, where maybe he was disillusioned at first with being an impersonator, then getting into Hollywood, being an actor, been there, done that, having seen perhaps the scene behind the scenes here in Hollywood, to the point where now, as you said, in the last number of years, he's kind of spilling the secrets about the Illuminati, who's running the show. He seems to be, I guess, pushing the boundaries, but at the same time, somebody's letting him push the boundaries on mainstream shows to talk about this stuff too. Like, do you think that he's now playing a role as maybe a controlled opposition to the waking up process to mock it out? Yeah, or is he starting to balk and becoming the same Truman Show guy where he wants out of the matrix? Or is it a combination of both? What are your thoughts, Jay?
I'm sure he's a torn. We just had Matthew McConaughey come out and say he had to go through initiations to rise up in Hollywood. And that was, and he's just had a conversion to Christianity or something. Right. So I think what you're seeing is that a lot of people are, there's the famous 60 Minutes interview with Bob Dylan where he said, you gotta do what the big guy wants in Hollywood, right? Mm-hmm. And he was clearly talking about somebody at the very top who was making all the decisions, and he didn't want to say it, and he caught himself before he said it. But I think it's now becoming kind of obvious that there is definitely a big power at the very top making all the decisions, and how deep that rabbit hole goes, I think it goes deeper than any of us really know. Right. Or really think. Now, I knew about it when I was in Hollywood, but I never got invited in. So I didn't, I never fortunately, I would not have done it anyway, but but I never got that high up where, I'm sure Jim Carrey has been approached and compromised, and he's got to watch it.
In every possible way, yeah. Have you seen the movie Babylon?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Sure.
We should probably do a decode on that. Speaking of the big guy in Hollywood, in the underbelly there. That's a fascinating show, too. If you're interested in that, maybe we'll do that one next, Jay. Let me ask you now, in terms of the character, Truman in the show, at first glance, he's described as a person who wants to learn, he wants to explore, but yet the whole system is designed for him not to explore that urge. So he's got the urge towards Sophia. So the love factor is driving him here to find Sophia again, which was ripped from his arms, right? But he wants to go to Fiji, presumably to see her again. But he also wants to explore. He wants to know things. But what's interesting in the movie, they have all of these mechanisms of control in place. So in one point, there's the drowning of the father, which creates this huge traumatic event and this fear of the water so that he can't leave physically. But then reinforced on that, there's a couple of layers. At the travel agency, on the wall, there's a bunch of posters of airplane crashes and a bunch of stuff. Like, you don't really want to travel, right? So it's kind of like odd that a travel agency would have those pictures on the wall. At the same time, yes, they're using the fear, but even on TV, when he's watching TV, the commercials, they're reinforcing of, oh no, you don't need to go anywhere to learn the truth. There's so much to learn here in the town. Like, don't think about anything else, right? So there's that continuous reinforcement of preventing him from exploring. So if we look at in a bigger context for true man or for humanity, we're being shunted by the mechanism to not awaken to our true potential, to the truths that are out there for humanity of who we are and where we want to go. Speak to that a little bit now, because in the movie, as soon as the movie starts, we see there are glitches in these mechanisms. So there's the glitch in the radio, and he's hearing people on the CB talking about him. It's like, what's going on? There's the light bulbs falling out. So there's a whole bunch of little glitches that show that the system is getting overloaded here. I want you to look at the astrology of that right now, Meg, why we're overloaded and why perhaps the truth is coming through that mechanism. So I'll ask you, Meg, that in a second. But Jay, speak about that now, why that's so important for us too, when we see the glitches in our matrix now, in our own understanding of, oh, these are the cracks that permit us to kind of see past this veil here and perhaps once and for all, jump for that glory here of our self-determination and our self-mastery. Jay.
Yeah, well, it's like, what did Leonard Cohen say? There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So I think that that's what's going on. And I think that whoever wrote the movie has a pretty good understanding of a lot of different subjects. The fact that they chose Sirius as the star that would fall. And it's pretty clear from Robert Temple's work on the Sirius mystery that we have had some kind of contact with beings from Sirius in the past. Mm-hmm. The Dogon tribe of Mali in Africa have deep memories of talking to and they're aquatic, by the way, and all this aquatic stuff in the Truman Show. And yeah, and in 97 or 98, when the movie came out, there wasn't a whole lot of talk about glitches in reality. Right. That didn't start until later. Now, everybody's picking up glitches in reality. I don't know if they're increasing or we're becoming aware of the glitches or what. I don't know, but even I am picking them up now too. So I think that the movie was very, forecasting what was going to be happening as humanity wakes up, and rebels against the Elohim gods live on the moon. Right. And the heck, how do you know that they were on the moon? I mean, you have to be the guy that wrote that has to be a very, very well-read person, because the things that they chose and the way that they presented it, really like, this is my last chance to get everything out, and I'm going to do it right now.
Right. That's the exciting part of all of this, going back now with this knowledge and this new fresh set of eyes to look at it with the understanding. Okay. Meg, the glitches itself, does that have to do with the yugas of time, the switching overs right now? Is there other astrology here that brings the wing beneath her wings, the air between her wings here, to lift us up to higher levels of understanding? What's happening?
Yeah, well, just like this movie, I think there's a lot of different layers happening all at the same time. But the biggest influence, I believe, oops, if I can just bring up my chart here, is, as you just said, JC, the greater yugas of time, the greater astrological ages, and the sidereal astrology, which show us the astrological ages. And, you know, the difference from now compared to the late 90s is ever since 2000, 2012, we have now entered a light age in the greater astrological ages. Even though things seem very dark and they are kind of effed up, there's a lot of crazy things happening in the world. You know, it's being revealed, it's being cleansed, because we are entering a higher frequency of this age of Aquarius, this Christ consciousness return. So that can definitely bring glitches in the matrix. We've also got, at the same time, you know, Pluto in Aquarius as we speak, which we have not had since the American independence, the French Revolution. You know, Pluto has a zodiac revolution of over 248 years. So since the beginning of this year, Pluto has now entered Aquarius again, which is the sign that rules weirdness, dimensions, off-worlders. And Pluto, which it's really interesting, at the beginning of the Truman Show movie, when Jim Carrey's la-di-da walking down the street and he sees this dog and he goes, "Oh, hi, Pluto." Do you guys remember that?
Yep.
So definitely who wrote this movie was very, very awake and red-pilled, because Pluto is the planet that we've only discovered since the 1920s in Western society, but in astrology, we associate it with revealing and the dark side of life and secrets. So it's funny that Truman's walking down the street in this perfect life and everything seems perfect. And then he goes, "Oh, hi, Pluto." Pluto is the destroyer and the dark side of life. And then he goes through that kind of mental breakdown, which is very Plutonic, where it starts to be revealed to him, what the heck is actually going on. And I believe we're all going through that in the collective time, what Truman went through, that Plutonic kind of breakdown, wake up. So also I want to say that in the comments, somebody here said, who was it here? White Pill Anon said, Jupiter in Gemini will bring a lot of disclosure. And I totally agree with that. I did when was it, Astro Woo for the month of May last week, where I introduced to the Beyond Mystic family the concept that Jupiter is going to be entering the sign of Gemini at the end of this month and will be in Gemini for a whole year. Jupiter is the planet that is of spiritual growth and expands whatever he's touching, whatever sign or planet he's in relationship to. And Gemini rules common sense, freedom of speech, information. So when Jupiter enters Gemini at the end of this month, in conjunction with us entering the same eclipse cycle that we had when the Truman Show came out, I think movies are going to get a lot more creative, more independent movies will be able to come out that are actually revealing deep truths. And also in the collective, like, truth information cannot be stopped. Doesn't matter if any of the social media platforms go down or we get censored, there's going to be ways for us to get the information out, and people are going to be waking up big time.
Right. Little Lizard says Pluto is always attacking Truman. Well, not attacking him to hurt him, but to get his attention, right? He's an annoyance. He's like, you have to deal with me, right? So that's kind of like the glitches in the system now too. They're annoying to a lot of the normies because they just want to go back to sleep and they don't have to deal with anything. But still, the consistency of what's breaking down right now is forcing them to look at all of this stuff. Meg, this was the episode you're looking for, the new Astro Woo, the decodes here in the month of May. So May 1st episode, guys, if you haven't seen it, go check it out. There's almost 2 hours chock full of information there. A really cool show. Where do I want to go with him there too in the awakening process? Well, actually,
can I say something?
Sure, go ahead.
So in 1998, that's when we passed the galactic meridian. The solar system on its ascendant up. We passed the galactic meridian in 1998 and started our ascension up, which you showed in your graph, Meg. And you had 2000, but 1998 is actually the exact year that this movie came out. This is really, truly the exact year that we passed over it. And and so that's when more galactic light starts hitting us. We start waking up because we pass the center of the plate of the galaxy is here, and we go through the Kali Yuga when we're behind the sludge and the matter that stops the galactic light from coming from the center of the galaxy. And 98, we finally just creeped over the top of that and started receiving all this energy, which is probably one of the main reasons these movies got made. Somebody was receiving this, the funders. I mean, that's the hard part, right? You can write all the scripts you want, but to get somebody to give you $20 million and hire Jim Carrey, that's a whole different set of wheels. So I think that movie, its timing is actually incredibly prescient. I'm only starting to realize it as I'm sitting here that that was really, because I was watching everything at that time, all the stars and where we were and everything, and talking to my friends about it and everything. And very interesting, actually.
It's funny because a lot of this information has been available to humanity for a long time. And to some extent, researchers have been at it for a while, but without the light, we couldn't see it, right? So now it's taking all this time to percolate. Same thing with Matrix, or even that movie They Live. We're starting to understand that now, maybe 20 or so years later, in a much different way. And in They Live, the protagonist is going through that same experiences of actually seeing reality and trying to show it to everybody else. Everybody says, no, you're crazy. But at the same time, in that movie They Live also, there's people living around him that know what's going on here. Like, oh my God, he could see us, right? So again, presuming that we're living with people and controllers here on the planet who are watching us very carefully and who are maybe taking the pulse of the situation here to either increase or decrease the control mechanisms. What do you make of that right now too? Like these actors in the show, of course, the controllers' minions who are living with the true man, they're actors. So that would suggest that perhaps our news media and our actors are also, in a big way here, part of that control system here on the planet. What do you make, Jay, of them taking the pulse on whether or not they can continue acting without being discovered? Or like Laura Lilly, I think her name is, at some point she says, get me out of here. I can't work under these circumstances. She's being exposed for the fraud that she is. Are we close to that now for Hollywood? Speak to that.
Yeah, I think we're really close. I think that the more awakened people are seeing the matrix clearer every day and realizing that they're not even close to understanding how deep it goes. And then the normies that are coming over are just, they're still all murky to them. But the thing is that as we go forward and more the energy from the galactic center comes in, and every day it's increasing, we're going to start seeing a lot of things. We're going to start seeing like the invisible creatures that live around us that we can't see. They're all going to start becoming apparent. People aren't going to be able to lie to each other anymore. It's going to be really hard to do anything like that. It already is, actually.
Right.
And so the facade is falling apart right now and cracking apart. And but also we're like Truman at the beginning of the movie. Most of us are. We're letting them define our reality. And we've got to stop that because they're using sorcery and everything on us. And we have to wake up to that going on too. So, that there's that problem too, is that, we're stuck in it too. They made us a reality that we believe in, whether it's true or not.
What's interesting here, what you just said about those masks falling and being harder and harder to lie to people. There's a scene here where Truman is looking at his wife and he's like, why are you even saying that? What does that even have to do with what I'm just saying? It's just realizing, holy fuck, this bitch, she's lying to me. Right? So it's a cool scene for him to wake up, and you can tell the sweat in her face, and she's starting to show, oh my God, he can see me. He knows I'm a fake now, right? And then her whole demeanor changes, and of course she tries to extricate herself from the situation. I think we're close to that now, and as we're seeing it like on a bigger, larger scale too, the falling of the gurus or the fake gurus, the astrology, Meg and I talked about this for the last year or so. It's happening all falling apart. All these crazy frivolous lawsuits are falling down. I don't need to get into that, but anyways, you guys know what I'm talking about. Okay, Meg, let's look into Ed Harris, his astrology, and how that ties in also to the show. So let me bring out that last slide, this one here. Fascinating stuff also. Of course, here he's being portrayed as Christos, Christ. So he's like a fake impersonator God, a creator who's created a world within the world. And at some point, almost exclusively at the end of the show, he's being interviewed now, and he's coming out into the open. And the interviewer says that this person guards his secrecy or his privacy with extreme jealousy, right? So they don't want to be seen, they don't want to be known. But at a certain point, he has to come out here because there are events that are happening in the world that needs to be redressed, right? So the farm is getting out of control, so to speak. So that's also interesting with the question of the Elohim and whether or not we're going to see some type of coming out here to try to redress the situation, because the farm is absolutely out of control here on the planet. So we'll get to in a second. Let's look at the astrology first. Meg.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say that I feel like Jim Carrey and Ed Harris were picked very specifically for this movie. And I saw someone in the comments earlier say, Jim Carrey's trying to ask for his forgiveness, or he knows that he sold himself out and he's trying to do the right thing. And that actually makes sense with his chart, okay? Because Capricorn, which I do have some Capricorn in my chart, but Capricorn, which Jim Carrey has so much of, Ed Harris doesn't, but just to touch on this for a second, they are tempted by power and success. So if Jim Carrey's like, a little comedian or actor, and then someone said to him, hey, come to this party, we're going to do some kind of weird stuff over here, but if you do some of this stuff, you're going to be in the biggest movie ever next year. Yeah, he probably said yes to that, being a young man that got tempted by power. And there's something about possibly just with placements in both of their astrology where I think this movie, they agreed to share it to help wake people up for a deeper level. And I think they were both picked very specifically and probably knew the whole ins and outs of it to like do their best job, if that makes sense. So Ed Harris, what's interesting about him is he also has a stellium in his chart, but for him, he's a Sagittarius sun with a Sagittarius stellium. And Sagittarius is the sign in Western astrology that rules freedom and higher consciousness, also revealing truths like Scorpio. So Ed Harris, I don't know anything about this guy, but if I had to guess as an astrologer, I would say he values freedom and the truth, like one of his biggest values. And his sun, moon, and ascendant are all at Leo degrees. Leo rules performance, being in the spotlight, art and film, like Pisces, and creativity. So he's a natural actor. He's gifted at that. And like I said earlier, he's also got his ascendant in Scorpio, as does Jim Carrey. So maybe you know a little bit more, Jay, about Ed Harris than I do, but I would guess that this is someone that is really open, maybe hides more of how much he actually knows compared to Jim Carrey, because Sagittarius, they don't really give a shit about needing to be like, out on the stage talking about what they know, kind of like how Jim Carrey is more doing that, exposing the Illuminati publicly. But he definitely knows a lot. I think he values freedom. And it's going to be really interesting because this year, Ed Harris is going to have an eclipse that we're going to have on September 18th, 2024, exactly conjunct his North Node at 24-25 degrees Pisces. So Ed Harris, and for some reason there's like a thumbs up showing up in front of me on the screen. He's going to be in the spotlight for something big. Okay. And Pisces again rules spirituality, film, also the water, lies, and deception. So maybe Ed Harris is going to talk publicly about the Truman Show. I don't know if he's already done that or not. But he could reveal something or be a part of some major truth being revealed this year. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Wow, fascinating. What would you like to add to that, Jay?
Pardon me?
What would you like to add to that?
Oh, I was just going to say that just a couple of years before the Truman Show came out, Ed Harris was in James Cameron's The Abyss, which is, he's the first lead guy to meet the aliens,
right?
The underwater aliens. And I personally feel that the Elohim have underwater bases as well as bases on the moon. And so it's just interesting that he was the first human to meet the aliens that live under the water, and there's all this water stuff going on in the Truman Show. So very interesting.
Fascinating. I want to look at his character. So Kristoff, the name, they talk to him about being the designer, the architect of the world within a world. And for all intents and purposes, he seems to be very involved, of course, in watching Truman, almost getting something out of it. You could see that there's an exchange of energy of making sure everything's perfect on scene for him, but it's not for the sake of the viewers as much as maybe for him. That's not said in the movie, but it appears that he's getting energy out of this construct somehow, right? And he wants to preserve the sanctity and the perfection of this construct at all costs. But in the interview, he kind of admits to the interviewer that Truman, humanity, they can discover the truth if they want, and we couldn't prevent them. So if they have enough drive and determination, there's really nothing we could do. We have mechanisms in place like the forest fires, the water, the fear, all that stuff, right? The forest fires were interesting in terms of the lockdowns that they want to perpetuate now too. I thought that was kind of interesting. They just slipped that in there. But he says, yeah, we couldn't prevent him being Truman. But he says, but what happens is that humans, for the most part, prefer not to know the truth. So I thought that was fascinating that he brings that into the context. What would you say about that in terms of the gnosis of our controllers knowing that at some point this game is already over, right? So they're playing the game. They know that at some point it's going to fail, and we appear to be at that critical moment now. Do you think that that's what he was alluding to in the interview? He's alluding to this time of humanity now where if we actually want to discover the truth, it's all there for us to find out, Jay.
Well, it's kind of interesting because Truman lives in a 15-minute city, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's what they want to put us all in,
Yeah.
right? And so he escapes his 15-minute city by waking up, right? And how the writer knew that they were going to make 15-minute cities back in all those years ago, but and so they're putting us in the Truman Show. They're trying to put us in the Truman Show right now, and they're trying to do it before we wake up.
Right.
And, we have the famous Zbigniew Brzezinski, before he died, said, we have to hurry, they're waking up too fast, right? Yeah. And I think that that's what's going on. And I think we're in great danger right now. I think that the more that we wake up, the more terrified that they get. And the faster they move, but also the more mistakes they make, right? And because they're moving too fast. And we're reaching the front end of the awakened people are reaching some pretty damning conclusions about reality,
Yeah.
Not just that we're controlled by the Elohim or that they're trying to lock us up in 15-minute cities like in Truman, but, who are the people in charge? Who are they really? And you keep, you go to step A. Oh, well, they're bankers, and then okay, no, they're more than that. They're this, so they're that. Then you start going down this really dark path. That is the darkest path of all. Is that what they are doing is mining us,
right?
You might say,
right.
And then we're now talking about a life and death situation where humanity's very existence is, in danger. And so I think that's where we're at right now. And we have to be careful because we can go too far. And right now they're letting us go really far. I mean, I'm saying things on YouTube now that I would have been kicked off a year ago, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just blurting it out, right? I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm just saying it. And so I don't know what's going on right now, why they're letting it suddenly get loosened up, especially during an election year when you'd think they would be clamping it down.
Right.
So I don't know what is going on. If everybody's just all of a sudden waking up all at once and all talking at the same time, because that's what it feels like. Yeah. So I don't know. Well, this is the most dangerous time of all right now, because we haven't gone over the precipice to fully awaken with the population, but we're really close. And we're so close that it's starting to scare the powers that be.
Well, in the movie, at some point, when things go awry, you can see that you just talked about these levels. When you say, oh, okay, at first you realize it's the bankers, and like, oh shit, no, it's the people behind the banker. And then you keep going and running up the mill until you get to the moon here. But I think that was interesting. But at a certain point, the bankers or the investors of the set, the design and all that, they're kind of being pissed off, and they're telling him, hey, you got to get this under control here. The investors are pissed off. And he's like, he doesn't care about that. He's not in it for that. He's in it for something else, right? So this energy exchange, so that leads to what you were saying here, the mining of humans, what they're getting. He never really touches it, but you could tell that his main concern is not the investors of the show. There's something else. It's not just about the money. It's about humanity. It's about our souls, probably, about our attention, right? He's feeding off of this somehow. And what's interesting, as you said, we're living in a difficult, dangerous time. He says one line here, Kristoff. He says this to two of his controllers who were kind of sleeping at the switch there that last night when Truman escapes his basement there. He says, unpredictable behavior must be reported immediately, right? And that brings us to the movie Westworld also, right? When the creator says, you're out of your loop, Dolores, right? They need us to be predictable and inside of our loops in order for this whole mechanism here of control, of watching over us, be beneficial and easy for them to manage. That's what's happening. So they're kind of alluding to you there, and I want you to talk about this, Jay, that if humanity gets out of its loop, that if we become, as Cliff High says in his Twitter the last couple of months, become ungovernable, right? Become unpredictable, then suddenly all hell breaks loose in the way that the control system is not designed for unpredictability. It's designed for us to be in all of these loops, as you say, these 15-minute cities, so that they control it. And that's breaking down. But part of that is humanity now being unpredictable. Speak about the Gnostic aspect of being unpredictable, not following a pattern, but following our own North Node in astrology. Jay.
Yeah, again, we go back to the three movies that came out at the same time or near the same time. So Dark City, Truman Show, and The Matrix are all about how the unpredictability of the heroes on all three of the movies are, and how that unpredictability caused the Matrix to fall apart, caused the control system to fall apart. And then, of course, we find out also in both in all three movies that actually the unpredictability is also being guided by exterior forces in all three movies. There's exterior forces trying to force the person to make that unpredictable act,
right?
For the reason of destroying the control system, right? It's like the doctor in Dark City and Morpheus in The Matrix, and the woman Sophia in Truman Show. They're pushing something, and their motives are unclear as why they're pushing it, but in the end, all three cause the control system to fall apart. And I think that's really the Gnostic myth of our age. And yeah, we have to start doing unpredictable stuff, and we will. And they're not going to be able to control what's going to happen. But out of the chaos, there will become a new order again, a higher order based on more spiritual principles than we are today. Because again, we've been living in, we're now out of the Kali Yuga, but we've got the worst hangover. I mean, this hangover is going to last hundreds of years. And we got PTSD from all the BS that we had to put up with during the Kali Yuga. And so we got a long ways to go to get out of it. I mean, we're physically out of it, but mentally and spiritually, we got a lot of darkness we got to get rid of. And the Gnostic view that we have fake rulers, fake gods. They're not really gods. They're telling us they're gods, but they're not. Right. That is, that's the hardest thing for a human to come to grips with. That all the religions that they've been taught and everything are all wrong. And now what do you do, right? And and that's where we're at right now. Religions are crumbling apart, for the most part, and the Western religions are under attack, and everything is on the edge of just falling apart. And I think we have to kind of push it.
Right.
Because I think it falling apart is the best thing that could happen to us.
You rebel rouser, you. Meg, anything else on the unpredictability of humans? Is there astrology also supporting this change in behavior of, as we say in Westworld, getting out of our loops? Can you add to that? And then I want to go into this idea of the stairway to heaven, where Truman eventually finds the exit to his matrix, and how that ties in also to these levels of understanding. So unpredictability, is there any astrology on that, Meg?
Yeah, totally. Well, Aquarius is a sign that rules unpredictability. And, Pluto being in Aquarius, which I just kind of got the download right now, that may be part of the movie when they bring up Pluto at the beginning of the movie, is not only showing Truman's, death, rebirth, scorpionic process of the dark night of the soul, waking up, but maybe it's also kind of like a cue for us to be paying attention to what is happening with Pluto in the current times as a marker of things that can occur. And Jay, everything you said so eloquently totally resonated with me, and especially that piece on that, it's not a form of strength. The elites right now, all the things they're doing that they're trying to do really fast, it's total weakness. And that is very dangerous. And I think it is important for us to be prepared for any kind of scenario, but it's not going to last forever. We are out of that Kali Yuga. But yeah, there's psychopaths. Okay, so people that do not feel, empathy for others, that have been in these power positions, that are now pissed off that they're losing power. And as Jay said, we'll stop at nothing to keep that. So it's important to keep that in mind and not be like spiritual bypassing, that it's all just 11 light and, peace and party, which I think we will be there soon. But yeah, so Pluto in Aquarius, also Uranus, the planet that rules Pluto, is in his weakest, most unfavorite position ever since 2018 and until 2026, which is Uranus in Taurus transit. So I don't know if you felt it, but ever since 2018, things have gotten a lot more unstable. There's been a lot more darkness coming to the surface, and we are going to have that until 2026, which I am so excited as an astrologer. 2026, all of the outer planets will be in way lighter signs. I think that will be a really big marker year for better energies to come. Not that everything will be perfect, because like Jay just said as well, we are literally in a PTSD, and we're going to have to, I think, heal the whole rest of our lives from what we've been through. But yeah, really interesting things going on. And there was something else I was going to say, but it's slipping my mind.
We can come back to it. At some point, Ed Harris says too, or the Kristoff says, "Oh, he's trying to convince Truman not to get out, because Truman is on the verge now of climbing the stairs there, the stairway to heaven." He says, "There's no other truths out there that you won't find here. Here it's safe. Don't worry. Over there, it's going to be fearful." And he's trying to convince him to stay within the matrix. And I think that's kind of what's happening now too. Like you talked about, these elites or these power people now afraid of losing power. We're seeing it here in Canada to the extent that, like, our newspapers are talking about the fact that Trudeau's still grasping for power. Nobody wants him. Nobody understands why he's still there. And the RCMP just looking, I don't know if they're looking at the astrology, they're looking at the pulse of humanity, but they're also warning the government now that Canadians might be revolting here very soon as they realize how broke they are. So we're at that stage now where Truman is just like, he's going for glory, and humans are about to go for glory also here too. They're afraid, but they're determined now to say this far, no further. And I think in the astrology, Meg, if I'm not mistaken, it could have been in your last Astro Woo, you talked about no more BS. So there was an astrological sign here that suggested, or that reinforced the no more BS anymore. People are tired of it, and they're not standing for it. Can you explain that quickly here before I get into the Stairway to Heaven segment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that might be the Jupiter entering Gemini transit that we're going to start having at the end of May. If you guys think there's already so much information out coming already, and it's just so much to keep up with, it's going to go even more for the whole next year, starting at the end of May, to the point where I kept stressing in that last Astro Woo show that I did, we're going to have to do more like social media breaks to just keep our nervous systems in check, especially for those of us that are already aware and awake very much to what's going on. Our nervous systems cannot keep this constant, okay, actually, this is how it is. And, actually, where they filmed Eyes Wide Shut was that castle. It's just all of these things constantly, we're going to have to slow it down. And now it's going to be a lot of other people's turns, a lot of our other brothers and sisters that will have to go through that kind of Truman process that a lot of us have already gone through. But it'll be so intense for them because it will be so much information coming out at the same time on top of what has already come out that a lot of us are aware of.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Now let's get into the stairway to heaven. In my view, there wasn't a better depiction than, of course, this scene. It looks like a stairway to heaven, right? We see the clouds in the background there. And eventually he gets to this black door, and on it, there's a little tag that says exit, right? And this is at the point where Kristoff has to make his voice known. You can hear the voice coming from the sky, and he's talking to Truman saying, hey, you don't want to do that. You know, it's safe in here out there. You don't have any more truths. And he's trying to convince him. And, you know, Truman's listening and listening. He's like, yeah, no. Yeah. What does he say? Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Like, fuck off and die. I'm done with this, right? So, speaking about the stairway to heaven, it's funny. Led Zeppelin recorded this maybe 20 years before the movie or so. So they were predicting something in there. I'll try to bring this up, but bring that concept of the stairway to heaven to those levels of understanding in the Gnostic terms here for the audience members, how in the Truman Show they're trying to describe this process that humanity is going through right now. Jay.
Well, it's kind of interesting also, the set of the Truman Show is a dome, right?
Right.
And the flat earthers have come out since then saying that we're living under this dome and all of that. So that's all very interesting. But what's also interesting about the dome is that if you've ever read Swedenborg, Heaven and Hell, a great book, he was an astral traveler a couple 250 years ago. And he wrote about his astral traveling experiences. And he said that reality is like an onion. It's concentric domes of realities. So we're living in this reality, and then we have, he said, 9 more levels above us, and 9 below us too, by the way. And he traveled down into hell, and he went up into these other heavens and to find them all. And the Gnostics called that the stairway to heaven. When you die, you'll go up to one of these concentric realities, and what your goal is to get to the very top one. You know, so that way you're liberated and free when you get to the very top, the outer most concentric layer of reality. And this is all made out of plasma, and I could go into that some other time. But so at the very end of the movie, that's the awakened man rising up and going up into his place in the higher realities, and perfectly evoked again. The screenwriter, just, I don't know, so has to be the most intelligent person, you know, ever. And that they ended it like that. I remember when I saw it in the movie theater, just like blown away by that ending. The clouds painted over the stairs, and him rising up, and Ed Harris desperately trying to talk him out of it. And
right.
Like, wow, there's like, you know, the Gnostic awakening right there in the movies.
And you could tell at some point, Kristoff, he thinks he's winning, and that the character Truman is going to come back down. But then when he sees that, this is not going well, so you could tell like the anger, the fear, the frustration, but also the realization, like he had said to the reporter earlier, there's nothing I could do to prevent them. So there's this kind of like cosmic law here that once our true soul decides to take action or our will into our own possession, these fake demiurges here, they can't do anything about it. They can kick and scream and be angry. Keep going.
Yes, and they're forced to show themselves.
Right.
That's the thing. The desperation is so big that they actually have to come out and say, okay, I really am here, right? And then, you know, that's your final awakening. Okay, you really do rule me. I thought you did, right? And that's when Truman wins. Yeah. When Ed Harris makes himself finally known to him, the demiurge, he's just so finally known. And then that shot there, it's just like,
right.
As a filmmaker, you know, he's just like that is
It's
That's
classic.
how you want to end a movie.
Right. So that brings us in here to the big reveal, which is the last segment I had. And guys, if you have any more stuff you want to add to, let me know. We can continue conversation. But it goes back to the moon here. So that big reveal. It appears that this reveal is coming up here. If we're looking at the Webbot data from Cliff High, he said that July and August, I think, quote unquote, alien shit or Elohim shit would be coming or hitting the fan or something like that. So we're getting to that desperation now where they have to reveal themselves. And that's un couteau à deux tranchants. Double-edged sword on one hand. Yes, there's the opportunity to get control back, but also the exposure of themselves is the other side where they're weakened by their own exposure, right? Because they say in the movie that he's guarding his privacy at all costs, the Elohim fake pretender god here in all of this. So let's go back to this shot of the moon itself. So let me see if I can bring this one here, this scene here. Okay, in the show, they call it the lunar room. They're talking about the 221st floor. I don't know about the numerology there. I wanted to ask you about that. I've been searching and racking my brains why the 221 would be important there too. There's another 22 at some point when he's looking at his radio that is glitching in his car. You can see the 22 through the screen, but I don't know about the 221. And then the description of where Ed Harris is or Kristoff here is a biomechanical sphere. So again, suggesting that what we are even seeing here is not an actual moon, which there seems to be enough evidence to suggest that. To the point where NASA also fired rockets at it, suggesting it was ringing like a bell, that it might have been hollowed, or a lot of remote viewers, including Ingo Swann also, who has data on this. So interesting that the reveal here, the revelation of the Elohim or the fake creator god of the world construct in the movie is relating and pointing our attention now to the moon. And this is the last segment here. So how do you tie all of this together here, Jay? Again, people can go watch our Angels and the Great Deception Exposed episode. This was from, again, December 21st. It's on my Rumble channel now. Let's have this conversation now about the disclosure of the Elohim and the moon, and how perhaps this is that last straw, just as it was in the Truman Show, for humanity to finally be able to take the decision on whether or not to stay or go and expand into self-mastery. Jay?
Well, the Greek poet and musician Orpheus, he wanted to meet the gods. And so he went to Mount Olympus and he said, I'm going up to the top. I'm going to go meet the gods since they live up there. And so he went up to the top of Mount Olympus. This is what he says. And he wrote a long poem about it. And a ship landed, a chariot of light landed, and he got in it. And there were these beings of not light, very humanoid, and they were in it. And they took him to the moon. He said he went to the moon. He said he went inside the moon, and it was filled with many mansions, thousands and thousands of mansions, he said, made out of all sorts of light and stuff. And that he was told that the watchers or the aliens or the gods, whatever they are, they live up there, and they come to Earth and they get food and water and women and all sorts of stuff. And then they took him back and landed him back on Mount Olympus. And then he came down and he told everybody his story. So then this was what, 2000 BC, something like that. So they've been there the whole time that the moon has been there, and probably came on the moon when the moon arrived here at some time period. We know that the moon was not always there because there's a Native American tribe in Bolivia, I believe, who has the memory of watching the moon being towed in to orbit in their tribal myths. So the moon is not a natural object. It may be somewhat natural, but I believe it is either a hollowed out asteroid, or they took an asteroid and heated it up, and then like with blowing glass, they just put gas in it and blew it up into a round sphere. And I believe that the Elohim live up in the moon and on the moon. And I think Bruce Sees All has pretty much proven that right.
Mm-hmm. You're right. I'm going to get Bruce back on the show here. He's got some amazing latest captures, including from the last eclipse to bring up. He's been on the show quite a few times. Meg, looking at the moon too, you've done a couple of shows this year too. I know Janine was pulling on this too, out of the blue. there seems to be this prevalent theme in some of your readings also where people are saying, watch the moon, watch the moon. We've been, I guess, being cued to that here, maybe for the last 8 months, maybe now 10 months maximum of all that. Why is that? And let's talk about the astrology too, and perhaps your readings with the personal clients on how this is coming up in the readings to see if we can get some insight as to why we need to be paying attention now to the moon. Go ahead. Oh, you're muted on your side, Meg.
Sorry.
No problem.
The moon represents in astrology our subconscious, our hidden self, very similar energy to Pluto. And I think a lot of what is going on right now with the transit of Neptune in Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, Pluto in Aquarius, all these things are revealing, major truths to the collective. I believe when we look at the moon, whether it's real or not, whatever the heck it is, it activates us to connect to our subconscious and really deeper truths, and helps us to do shadow work as well, which I think is something very important at this time. Spirituality, as we've talked a lot about on shows on Beyond Mystic, JC, is not just love and light and feel good. Sometimes we need to do the deeper shadow work, the deeper real talks about, okay, what the hell is really going on here, which can be uncomfortable. And I think a lot of people are being guided to know what's really going on with the moon, to look at the moon, because it activates our connection to our subconscious and reveals deep things to us. And I know there's many theories on the moon, and I think the truth about the moon is definitely going to be coming out in the next, I would say, year, 2 years tops, especially with Pluto at 0 degrees, 1 degree, 2 degrees of Aquarius, and Aquarius rules outer space. Pluto is revealing there's going to be a new planet discovered in our solar system, more likely, because every time we go through a consciousness shift on the planet, a new planet gets discovered, or major asteroid or something. And also, I think that will tie into the moon, what's really going on with that.
Wow, that's fascinating. One of the shows I did with Cliff High, it was the Sci-Fi World Lunacy episode. I believe it's from September of October of last year. We're supposed to do a part 2 at some point here, but in it, we describe how some researchers, astronomers discovered that in or about 1910, there was a significant change in our perception of the moon with the technology being used at the time, the telescopes and all that, suggesting that something had overlaid or that was obscuring somehow our actual vision of the moon, of what it actually looked like. So whether that was a technology put in place in front of us, whether that's a technology on the moon itself, we're not sure. But it brings this question of technology. Jay, you just mentioned the technology there. In the show, The Truman Show, okay, it's filmed in the late 90s, but Truman doesn't have access to much technology. He has an old push radio in his car, old TV set, old fridge in his kitchen. So he's not advanced. But the people in the moon, in the stage room, they have all of these gadgets and push screens, different technology to be able to manipulate the weather, to cue the sun, to cue the light, to change the clocks everywhere and put everybody back into start position, all of this stuff. So suggesting that even right now, and maybe we can end on this, the Truman Show is also telling us maybe, and this is my feel about it, to be weary of the tech that we are using or that we're letting somebody else use against us right now, right, in this control system. In some cases, this technology that we're using today is being presented to us as something good for us. It's more convenient for life, but at the same time, it's a lot more convenient for the controllers if we're using that technology also. Now, we're seeing the glitches with the CBs, with the radios during the show. Do you think that technology right now is going to play a part either in favor of the controllers right now or in the favor of humanity? Where are we on that battle of using technology for the benefit of mankind versus using it for the benefit of the controllers to continue reinforcing and perhaps create an even stronger 15-minute prison for humanity? Where are we on that scale, Jay?
Well, we're in the middle of the war. And, so those of us who embrace technology are racing forward to, like, getting JFKX out, or my next film, which will be out before the end of the year. We're using the high technology to get the larger truth out. And that's what we have to be doing. We have to accept the fact that we are in like an info war, and that we have to get as much information out as fast as possible. before they do anything like a clampdown. And I think that's where we're at. And you know, and the thing is that, you know, I can make a feature film for very little money nowadays because of the technology. So I've gone from, you know, working with a 35 millimeter movie film and having, you know, a 90-minute documentary cost $600,000 to a 90-minute documentary now costing $6,000. So, you know, and so we all have to use that technology, just like you're using, you know, YouTube and all these other things to get the word out. That has to be our primary objective right now, is to shower the normies with as much of the facts as they can possibly handle.
Just a couple of years ago, doing this broadcast with 3 viewers, the on-screen changes and all that would take 7 or 8 people in a big control room to do. Now we're all doing that with technology. So I agree with you. It's kind of like the Gutenberg press. We could use it to our advantage. So I think maybe that's, I want to get into that segment now. What advice do we give the true man, humanity watching our show here, the Decode of the Truman Show, moving forward to get to that stairway to heaven here? What perhaps are the pitfalls to watch for, and what perhaps are the words of advice here moving forward? I'll start with Meg, and then we'll finish with Jay. So Meg, any advice in traversing these astrological times? And put that also in context, if you like, with the movie and the character Truman and all of us watching the show, who we are individually and collectively the Truman also.
Yeah, can you guys hear me right now? The connection's a little weird on my end. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, you froze, but you're back. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I feel like what's really important, which I feel like a lot of people know already, but just to reiterate, that whatever we give power to strengthens. Okay. So if we don't resonate with the brainwashing TV shows, movies, and I love certain movies and TV shows, but just saying the really, you know, brainwashing news, movies, music as well, celebrities, these things, politicians that don't resonate with us, just turn it off. Don't feed it. Yeah. And it loses power. And that helps to stop in it and weaken it, where it, you know, these darker forces feed off of our louche. We've talked about that a lot as well. So just turn it off. If you're getting really freaked out from scrolling and, oh my God, there's so much information coming up, turn it off. Go outside, drink some water, take some deep breaths, come back into your body. There's nothing wrong sometimes with just turning off all of the noise coming our way, coming back into your own energy, your own sovereignty and power. And I also, that was the thing I forgot to say earlier, changing it up. It's funny that you brought that up, JC, because in my personal life, I felt guided to just start like changing things up. And maybe that's why when I go to a restaurant, like I always order, you know, a certain meal, I change it up, because that changes my frequency and that changes my consciousness, and it opens me up in different ways. And by us just doing little changes in life, doing things differently, it's that 100th monkey effect of other people all around us will start doing that too. And their consciousness will expand too. So maybe walking around your neighborhood in a different way, listening to different music than you normally do, watching a different movie than you normally do, exercising in a different way to open up our consciousness, which is not only good for us to do things in a different way, but to activate the others around us. And then
Go ahead.
The last thing I wanted to say is that when I was doing my research for Uranus being conjunct Algol, which is going to happen July 14th, July 15th, I discovered that it was around that time that in 1941, commercials started for the first time, when Uranus was conjunct Algol. Algol, Jay, I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, is a fixed star that in astrology we call the demon star. The alcohol, the root word comes from Algol, very dark energy. So, you know, we're having 80-something years after 1941, Algol this summer in July, again, will conjunct Uranus and Taurus. And it's bringing up the brainwashing and the commercials. So there could be a big change around that, a revolt around that. And actually, I just realized another thing I want to say is I think there could be a big revolt around the smartphones coming up in the next year or two, because the iPhone was invented and released to the public in 2008 when Pluto entered his Capricorn transit. The dark side of life, the dark arts people are very powerful when Pluto, the malefic, is in Capricorn, another malefic. So they put out to the public, check these out. These smartphones are going to be so great. You can do everything. Meanwhile, they've tracked everything you've ever done on a smartphone.
Yeah.
So if they wanted to blackmail any of us, and I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but this is just like my Scorpio coming through, they have everything on you that you've ever looked at on any device, pretty much, including the smartphones, right? So there could be something coming up around that this year of, hey, JC, hey, Jay, you don't want to be a good boy, good little girl. You know, we're going to release, you know, what you've looked at on your phone, or we're going to, you know, they have all that information. They have all our data. And with Pluto now being in Aquarius, Pluto, the revealer in Aquarius around technology, there's going to be a major wake-up call around our relationship to technology, how they have all the information on us already. But they don't need microchips in us, you know? Right. And I think people will be very pissed off about that. And it will backfire on them. It's not powerful for them. It will backfire on them. And I think we the people are in a very powerful position. But like Jay said, it is a dangerous time to be aware of. Sorry, that was a lot all at once.
No, that's perfect. And I wanted to add to that with the cell phones in maybe 2015 or 16, there was one data set that kept growing in Cliff's Webbot data, suggesting that at a certain point, the smartphone sales would die off very, very quickly. And that was conjunct other data sets with the death of the dollar, the American empire, perhaps this revolution 2.0 around the planet. And we're starting to see the sales of the iPhones also go down just now. So we seem to be entering that period of time that was being forecasted here maybe almost 10 years ago now in that Webbot data set. So that one is still, I guess, increasing. I'll have to ask Cliff about that to see if he's got more data. So that's interesting, Meg. Thank you. In terms of getting out of the loops too, I just wanted to add, you said about, you know, changing your food, changing your routine a little bit. Yeah, change your schedule by a few minutes, because in the show, at some point he's sitting in the car with his wife and he says, okay, there's going to be a lady on a bike, and then a guy with flyers, and then there's a beetle with a dented fender, right? He says they're on a loop. So if you change your loop, you're going to recognize that other people are in the loop, right? So that'll help you see even more and wake up from this matrix. I wanted to add that maybe as a little piece of advice there to what you said, Meg. Jay, you mentioned JFKX. I brought it up at the beginning of the show. Guys, you can watch the Decode I did with Jay a couple of months ago, free on Rumble. And of course, if you want to watch the documentary itself, you can do so here at jfkx.org. You'll see the links there if you're in America or around the world here on how to get access to that. You mentioned you're bringing up another movie this year. Do you want to share that first? And then let's end on your words of advice here for the Truman population watching the show. Jay?
Yeah, I got a writer and I are making another film. This one will be using pop culture to explain the history of the MK Ultra program. And we've got a brilliant way of incorporating certain movies into the history of MK Ultra and how it got manifested here in the United States and America and the world. And then I'm doing another movie after that, right after that, which is going to expose one of the top pop rock groups of all time. So okay. Lots of revelations coming out.
Okay, really cool. Well, we'll be sure to invite you back on the show when you're ready to share that with the audience members. I can't wait. So Jay, now going back to Truman and the people watching the show, any words of advice? In the context of the movie too, what we saw in there would seem to be the good advice for Truman, but in your view also of where we stand in the yugas of time, what we need, the treacherous, maybe unpredictable nature here of our enemy and how scared and how maybe cornered animal syndrome they may be right now. We are in exciting, but yet dangerous times, as you said earlier. So any words of advice here on how to move forward through this time, Jay?
Yeah, so Truman succeeds in his enlightenment by conquering his own fear. And that's exactly right. Perfectly right. That's exactly how you do it. And so what is fear? You know, fear is fear of dying is what fear is, mostly a fear of suffering, but mostly it's fear of dying. And as we have been in the Kali Yuga, we've had this kind of crazy view of the afterlife and not really understanding that we are deeply connected to a plasma cloud that is around the Earth. And that's what these layers of planes of reality are, that Swedenborg was talking about. And we're attached to by the thing called the Sushumna, which is 1,000,000th times the width of a human hair. And it connects us. It's a plasma filament that connects us to this larger cloud. And when you die, your light body collapses in on you, and it goes around your spine and it shoots out through the Sushumna, and you go back up into the plasma cloud. In other words, you don't die. So there's nothing to be afraid of. And so as soon as we all realize that there's nothing to be afraid of, then we are Truman and we can start walking up the stairs. And that's really where we are right now. And we're losing our fear. That's what the awakening is all about. It's people saying, okay, I'm done. I'm going to start talking. I'm done. I'm done being quiet. And that's exactly where we are right now. We're at that point where Truman is now looking at his friend who he's been drinking beer with and realizing that the guy's a bullshit artist. He's a liar, and he's not really my friend at all.
Right.
Which is the best part of the movie, by the way.
Right.
I think.
But I've been your friend since we were 7 years old. The last thing I would do is lie to you. Like, you fucker. I love that scene. And I'm sorry. Oh, yeah.
The whole movie is just built right around that scene. And Jim Carrey plays it perfect. I have to say.
Yeah. Great movie, guys. Thank you so much for the participation, guys, in the live chat today. You guys are amazing. Thank you, Jay, for all your insights on the show here today. Really appreciate it. Really fun reboot here of our movie Decode series. Please stay on the line after I disconnect here, Jay, so we can choose our next movie and the next date for this next iteration here. And folks, if you like the episode here today, see a lot of great comments here. Please do hit that like button and share the movie Decode with your friends here. Hopefully we can get even more eyeballs onto this awakening process and our eventual path here to the stairway of heaven with Mr. Truman. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Meg, for all of the research also and your beautiful insights on astrology. And guys, while I'm at it, if you're looking at getting a personal reading with Meg, you can do so here at consultations.beyondmystic.net. You can do the personal forecast, the birth chart, or the solar return. Meg, very quickly, can you explain the difference between the three products here on the website? And also, guys, don't forget, if you use the code Beyond Mystic in one word, you'll get an extra 10% off there. Meg, how do these differ in perspective from the audience members?
Yeah, well, the birth chart is kind of the best one to maybe start off with, unless you have pressing questions about the current time. That's going into your sacred cosmic map that I love to share all the energy and information on for you guys. And then we've got two other options. The personal forecast is looking at your year ahead with the astrological transit. So I go over the most important things that you need to know. I can answer any questions with the astrology, and I also weave my intuitive insights into that as well. And the solar return is your birthday chart. Every birthday that we have, when the sun returns, we have our solar return. We have a new chart that gives us a new influence for the year ahead. So those are the differences between the three.
Okay, very good. And folks, if you're really interested in astrology, of course, you can take Astrology Foundations, which is the first part here on Beyond Mystic Academy, or beyondmystic.academy. And of course, if you're already there and you're looking for level 2, it's available now for purchase, where we get into much more of the decoding of this crazy world of ours with Meg Moonbeam for Astrology level 2. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching today. I love you guys. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.
Bye.